you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today is going to be the update to Sting, the Stamina Nightblade for the Scalebreaker DLC. Now this has been used quite a bit in the past and it's still very, very strong. In fact, a little bit stronger in this update due to a couple of skills, but overall this has still got the same kind of application as it has before. Very static rotation, quite easy to get your teeth into. May require a little bit of practice because the Nightblade is a little bit tricky, but it's going to be a lot simpler than some of the more dynamic rotations out there where you have to keep constantly swapping bars to keep an eye on all your buff timers. So first of all, we're going to go into the stats, pop a potion, make sure everything's running. It's 17k max health, 33.1k max stamina, with 1500 recovery, 1525 in fact, 4.1k weapon damage, and 48% crit chance, with 11k resist across the board. Now those resistances will go up because we do have passive bonuses to that gives us Major Ward and Major Resolve, or you can get them from your group, so don't worry. And our weapon damage and crit will actually go up as well with our skills. Now we're using 64 of our attribute points into stamina to give us as much as we can possibly get versus the setup, Shadow Mundustone and Stage 4 Vampire. The food we're using is our Tayum Takeaway Broth, so we do have the gold stuff, but you don't have to use this if you don't want to. This will give us a flat resource to health and stamina and give us health and stamina recovery. Failing that, you can of course use Dubious Command Throne, which is a bit cheaper. You don't get the health recovery and the rest of the stats are slightly lower, but it's very, very close. Failing that also, if you have very high sustain in your group, you can of course use very flat food. You may need to heavy attack once in a while, but if you've got really, really good stamina sustain in your group, especially if you've got people using master staves, you may get away with this. But the choice is yours. Flat out, of course, if you use this food, your stats will go much higher, so you'll have 19.8k health and 35k stam, which is awesome. But if you don't have loads of recovery in your group, you don't have lots of shapes being thrown to help you sustain, you may want to stick to this. Now, I'm going to go into the skills first of all. These are going to be in detail, so do pay attention. If you already know what to do here, then of course you're welcome to skip. But if you do then ask questions that have already been answered, I won't be answering them. I do go into these in a lot of detail, and I show you a lot of tips and tricks as well. So, Rend and Slashes, of course, is the first ability. This is in the dual wield skill line. Second ability to unlock starts off as Twin Slashes, morph it to Rend and Slashes. This does an initial hit to the target and then bleed damage over time afterwards. In fact, we'll get a target dummy out here so we can show you a couple of these skills. This is very simple. Run up to the target, put the dot on it. Now, that will do damage over time for 10 seconds plus the initial hit, of course. If you prefer to, however, if your survivability is down, you can use the other morph of this. The other morph is actually called Blood Craze, and it will do the same amount of damage over time. It will do a slightly lesser initial hit for about 2.5k instead of about 3k, but it will heal you once every 2 seconds, so you can use that if you prefer. But either morph, whichever one of the two you choose, you want this particular skill regardless. Next up is, of course, Barb Trap. This is in the Fighters Guild skill line. Name change and application change in Scalebreaker. Basically starts off as Trap Beast, morph it to Barbed Trap. Now this used to go down on the ground and it used to last 6 seconds, and it used to reapply. It used to be called Rearming Trap. It no longer does that. Now, once it's on the ground, very simple, it will pop, and the person caught inside of this, whether it's a boss or not, will be affected with a damage over time that lasts 18 seconds, and you will gain Minor Force, increasing all of your critical damage by 10% for the whole duration. Don't worry about the immobilization side of it. If the boss is hit by this, obviously they can't be immobilized. It doesn't mean the skill won't work. It just means they can't be immobilized on the spot. Everything else will still apply. You must keep this up 100% of the time. Next up is Relentless Focus. This is an Assassination skill line. Fifth ability you unlock starts off as Grim Focus, morph it to Relentless Focus. Now this is a tricky skill, but it's been made a lot easier than it ever has been before. So, basically, this lasts 30 seconds, and each light attack or heavy attack that you do applies a bonus. Now this isn't explained very clearly in here. This says light attack or heavy attack and stacks up to 5 times. You get damage mitigation bonus, 2% for each one. But it's not each light attack or heavy attack. Each light attack can give you a 2% damage reduction bonus and stack up to 5, yes. But each heavy attack actually counts as 2. So you can do 5 light attacks, or 1 heavy and 3 lights, or 2 heavies and 1 light. This will apply regardless as long as you get those 5 ticks, but a heavy counts as 2. This is very important when you're on your rotation. If you have to heavy attack, bear in mind that 2 ticks will be acquired from that heavy. Now, Why is this important? Not just for the damage mitigation. That's just a small bonus that we will take advantage of at execute, and we'll just get a little bit in there during the fight. What this really does, what we want it for, is each light attack or heavy attack that we stack up the points with, when it gets to 5, the skill will change into a spectral bow. Now, that will cost less stamina to cast, so it's cheaper than the initial cost, but it will fire the bow and then start the ticks again from 0. Also, if you're within 7 meters of the target, you'll actually heal. It's very, very strong indeed. Now, this used to give us a minor berserk. It does not no more. It used to have to stay with us all the time, and technically it does not. During the fight, yes, of course, we do have to reapply this once every 30 seconds to make sure we've still got it. But at execute, we don't have to reapply this once we've got our 5 stacks, because in our rotation, this changes. We take advantage of the damage mitigation instead of the actual hit itself. But that will make more sense once we get there. For the most part, you need to make sure that you apply your light attacks. So, what you need to do, once it's active, light attack, and you'll see in my buff timers, there are 2 skills that look exactly the same. One has got a massive timer on it, going down from around 20 seconds now, and the other one has just got 1 tick inside of it. Another light attack will make that 2. Now 3, now 4, now 5, and as you can see, it has changed to a different skill. This is your bow. You fire it, it does loads and loads of damage, it heals you, and then it resets the 5 ticks to 0 again. Now, all you need to do is keep an eye on that. To see this, by the way, especially if you're on console, all you need to do is have your buff timers showing, and make sure you have permanent effects. That way you can see the ticks themselves. It's always on the left-hand side of the buff timers as well, just after Vampire. So you see 5 ticks, it'll change it to a spectral bow, fire it, start again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fire it, start again. Or a heavy attack, 2 ticks. Heavy attack again, 2 ticks, and then a light. Keep that in mind. You must have 5 light attacks, or 2 heavies and a light, or whatever order you want to go in. You've got to get 5 ticks, and they carry over as well. So if you're on this bar and you swap, you can still acquire the stacking procs, so don't miss your light attacks on your bow. Now, I'm going to go into the next few skills. I will show you the rotation, don't panic, that does look a little more complicated than it needs to. Now, next up is Surprise Attack, our main spammable, in fact. This is the first ability to unlock in the Shadow skill line. It starts off as Veiled Strike, morph it to Surprise Attack. Now, this is very simple. You just hit the target with it. Job done. That's it. Now, for doing so, you'll do a large amount of single target damage, actually. And if you're flanking the enemy, you will actually reduce their resistances by 5% for 10 seconds. Now, I know people want to get to 18200 as far as resistance and pen caps and stuff are concerned. And yes, this will push it over the edge a little bit. However, there are gaps in buffs and debuffs during fights. And this does kind of fill that. Also, as long as you're using this skill, it will stay. If you're not, especially during execute, it will fall off. So just bear that in mind. Again, when we get to the rotation, execute, both of these abilities are going to be somewhat altered, depending on the situation. But above all, of course, this is your main spammable. It's very, very strong indeed. Make sure you use this all the time. Next up is Killer's Blade. This is also in our Assassin skill line alongside the Relentless Focus. First ability you unlock starts off as Assassin's Blade, morph it to Killer's Blade. This is incredibly cheap. This is our spammable at execute only. You do not use this skill until the target is below 25% health. This will also heal you if you kill an enemy or within 2 seconds of hitting them with this, or if someone else kills it within 2 seconds if you hit them with it, based on the max health that you have. So this is actually a little bit of a sneaky heal for tanks. If you're in a trash pull and you stab something with this when it's low health and someone else kills it, you take a massive heal. But for us, it's pretty decent. I mean, it's a 4k heal almost, especially if you crit it as well. But above all, very simple. Stab it. That can't be any simpler. But conditions apply. Never use this above 25% health. While under 25% health, this of course does 300% more damage. But above it, it's crap. So this is only for execute. Can't be any clearer with that. Flawless Dawnbreaker, of course, is our main ultimate, our front bar. We do not use this. We only have it on here for stats. It's in a Fighters Guild skill line. It's level 10 Fighters Guild you need to actually unlock this. It does do a hefty amount of damage. It does give you 300 weapon damage for applying it for 20 seconds. So maybe in some situations, if you're against Undead, Daedra, or Werewolf, where you get a boost to this in the passives, you could utilize it to nuke stuff down quickly and get your ultimate back up really fast as well. But flat out, our backbar ultimate was stronger for single target. So this is a very situational skill, but for the majority of the time, this is actually here just for stats alone, which are in the passives, and they will be coming up shortly. Next up, of course, is Circle of Protection, which has been changed to Ring of Preservation. So Circle of Protection, Ring of Preservation is the morph. Second ability down in the Fighters Guild skill line, and this is here for 2 reasons. 1 for protection, 2 for heals. So if you do need to heal, you should be at the front line anyway, because you are a very, very close melee-based setup. If you put this down, you will heal every half a second, and so will your group. And when you're buffed, this is hefty as hell. You can get about 1.4, 1.6k every half a second heals out of that. So that's quite strong. 1600 per half a second, that's 3200 every second. That's actually a bit more than Vigor. In fact, a lot more than Vigor. So this is an oh shit heal. Don't use it all the time because it is expensive, but it protects your group with minor protection and heals everyone inside of here and gives you minor endurance as well, increasing your stam recovery. In my rotation sometimes I have got stuck with the ultimate, which I'll explain in a moment, and there's nothing I can do for half a second, so I tend to sneak that out, get myself the recovery bonus and get the heal as well. There are lots of situations where you can use this, other situations where you don't really need to, but for the other part of this, you can actually benefit from it being on your bar anyway, because it does give us a Fighters Guild passive, which will be explained shortly. So this is a double win for us. It gives us minor protection and a heal and recovery, and at the same time, we do get extra stats for having this there. So even if you never use it, it does give us a benefit overall anyway. Poison Injection is next in our bow skill line. 5th ability to unlock, starts off as Poison Arrow, morph it to Poison Injection. Now the other morph of this does still do damage over time, but it does an interrupt instead. This version, however, has an execute passive built into it, where with the enemies, if they are under 50% health, this will get stronger. They'll take more and more damage the lower the health they go. So you must keep this up 100% of the time. Not only that, it's very important for our weapon, especially if you have the correct one. So do not let this fail. Very simple. He has damage over time over him. That's it. Brilliant. All done. Next up, of course, is Consuming Trap. Now, this got changed drastically in Scalebreaker. This is the first ability you get in the game. You don't even need a skill point for it until you morph it. Starts off as Soul Trap, morph it to Consuming Trap. Now, this used to do just magic damage, but now it scales off of your highest offensive stat, which means if you have high magic and spell damage, this will do magic damage. If you have high stam and weapon damage, this will do physical, and obviously for us, this will do physical. At the same time also, as being a damage over time, which is really hefty, and costing magicka, by the way, so it's really good for our sustain. We're not spamming caltrops and running out of juice. This will heal you and give you resources back if the target dies. You will get 20% of all 3 resources back if whatever you're up against is killed, or you kill it while this is running. So if you have multiple targets in the room and you put this on 3 or 4 things and they all die, that's 20% of your resources back 4 times. Very, very strong indeed. Application is simple. It's ranged as well. Just leave it running, and when it runs out, reapply it. Can't get any simpler than that. Now, next up is a new skill to the setup. Disclaimer. Yes, you can use the old skill that we had here if you want to help with sustain and survivability, which was, of course, Leeching Strikes, which is Siphoning Strikes to start with, morph it to Leeching Strikes. If you activate this, for 20 seconds, your light attacks will heal you and restore stamina. And if you consume it, or it runs out, however long it's been running, is however much stamina you will get back, because it accumulates stamina over time, kind of puts it in a pot, or if it runs out, you'll get the full 4270. That is just for sustain. However, if you are good with your sustain, maybe your group is throwing out loads of shapes which is helping you, or maybe you're just very good with your rotation anyway and you can gauge whether you do or don't need to do a heavy attack. We are not using this skill anymore. We are using Dark Shade. Now this is in the Shadow skill line. It's a 5th ability to unlock. Starts off as Summon Shade, morph it to Dark Shade. Now this costs magic also, so great for our sustain, so we don't have to use another stamina ability here. And this does do magic damage, yes. But this is scaled off of your highest offensive stat. So whichever resource you use the most, that's the one it will scale off of. Very much like Flames of Oblivion for the Dragon Knight, where it does fire damage, but if you have high magic, it scales off of that. If you have high stamina, it scales off of that. This is the same thing. It does magic damage every hit. It's actually a pet, and it can't be hit either, so it can't die or anything like that. It doesn't get in the way, but it does scale off of your stamina. So, all we need to do, we do have to have a target. We can be at range or close in. And there's your little pet. Now, he'll do stabs every so often, and he'll do spins. Now, the spins are AoE, the stabs are single target, and they can crack out a hefty amount of damage, especially when you've got buffs and bonuses applied. Now, what this also does, if you pay close attention to the details, it does hit over and over and over. It does do wicked spins, that does AoE damage, but it applies minor maim, reducing the target's damage output by 15% for 4 seconds. That reapplies every single hit. If you keep this up 100% of the time, minor maim is on that target all the time. You are debuffing the boss's damage output. Now, most tanks try to use this with CC abilities or heroic slash or anything like that to try and keep an uptime on minor maim, and yes, they have to keep an eye on it, and it can get tricky. Not for most, but for some. However, for us, it's very, very simple. You just keep this running. As long as that doesn't run out, look at the buff timers above his head. The purple one with the broken sword in the middle. It's constantly reapplying. It's not going to run out. The only time it'll run out is if that disappears. Don't let that pet disappear. Not even at execute. Now, next up, of course, is Arrow Barrage. Now, this is a tricky one. It's the second ability in the bow skill line. Starts off as volley, morph it to Arrow Barrage. Now, this can be a little bit tricky, because Arrow Barrage has got a shorter duration than Endless Hail, but it does have more damage. Endless Hail has less damage and less area of effect size as well. But, of course, the duration helps with our rotation. Now, both of these have been tested a lot, especially with different weapons as well. This one did do more damage, but you do have to be on top of your rotation, because the downtime is quite long if you're not. If you are slow with your rotation, or if you're practicing, you may want to go with Endless Hail instead. You'll see minimal damage difference. But if you're very experienced, you will get more out of Arrow Barrage. The choice is actually yours. Either one of the two is correct for this setup, so that's your choice. This is very simple, however. AoE on the ground, everything in here takes damage every 1 second. Just remember, this one has a larger area of effect. The other one has a shorter area of effect and a longer duration. So in the Assassin skill line, starts off as Deathstroke, morph it to Incapacitating Strike. Now, this was altered slightly to avoid very fast weapon swapping and invisible skills, basically. In PvP especially, you could activate this and people didn't even know it was coming. Now, if you try and swap bars, you can't, or it won't apply. So you have to make sure that you stay on the bar you're on while using this. Now, before, we used to activate this and swap bars very quickly. Because we can't do that, I've altered the rotation to make sure this actually fits very, very well without us stuttering our rotation at all. Now, the application of this is simple. You attack the target with it. It costs 70 ultimate, which is ridiculously cheap. It does disease damage initially, and for 6 seconds, all of your damage done to that target is increased by 20%. Also, while slotted, you gain Reeve, which restores 100 magicka and stamina when you deal damage with a light attack or heavy attack on the enemy with a negative effect on them. How is this important? Well, we're using both stamina and magicka. So, all we need to do is apply a debuff, right? This pet is applying a debuff. So we will constantly get magic back and stamina back for hitting him, as long as we're doing our light attacks. And our light attacks are important for Relentless Focus, because if we don't light attack, we don't get our Spectral Bow, we don't get our damage mitigation. So that skill on the front is forcing us to benefit from our ultimate on the back, and our pet is forcing those two together to give us more resources. Very important indeed. But this is the application of it, very simple. The Wicked Spin is if you have 120 ultimate or more, but he just does a regular stab if you have the 70 ultimate. Now, also, the difference to that is basically the enemy will be silenced for 3 seconds if you have 120 ultimate, if they can be silenced. So bear that in mind. Mostly used for PvP, but it can be used in some PvE elements or areas against certain enemies, not so much bosses. But above all, you must use this every time it is available. But there is a certain order in which you should use it. Don't use it straight away on your back bar, because remember, your rotation may put you there for quite some time and you're not going to benefit from the damage you could get from your front spammables. So this will make more sense when we get to the actual rotation. Now, passives, of course. These are very, very important. Assassination skill line first. Increases your weapon damage and spell damage by 10% while you are sneaking or invisible. That's not hugely important for us. And also increases duration of stun from sneak. You don't have to get this if you don't want to. Although if you're solo in PvE, this could be helpful. When an enemy dies within 2 seconds of being damaged by one of your assassination abilities, you restore 1876 magic or stamina, whichever maximum is higher. So, our assassination skills are Spectral Bow and Killer's Blade and Incapacitating Strike. If any of those hits the target and they die within 2 seconds, we actually get magic back. Again, very helpful for our magic sustain on our back bar. Increases your weapon and spell crit ratings by 438 for each assassination ability slotted. Now, we've got 2 on the front bar and we've got 1 on the back. So we get those crit bonuses for each skill. On the front bar, we have a higher crit skill, so just bear that in mind. But we do have high crit anyway, so don't worry. That will become clear once we get to the gear. Increases your critical damage done by 10% as long as an assassination ability is slotted on your bar. Also, dealing critical damage grants you and your group minor savagery, increasing your weapon crit rating by 1320 for 20 seconds. So if that wasn't obvious, let's do a crit. This here is for you and your group. Where's it gone? There it is. Minus, it keeps jumping. Minus savagery. So there's your crit chance bonus for stamina DPSs. Keep up a crit. That will stay with you forever. Very easy to apply. Shadow is quite simple. Increases your health, stamina, and magic recovery by 15%. We need that. Casting a shadow ability grants you major resolve and major ward for 6 seconds, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 5280, and this duration is increased by each piece of heavy armor worn. We're actually only wearing 1 piece of heavy, so we get a 7.5 second bonus to this. But how do we keep this running? Well, this is a shadow ability, and so is this. So as long as we're using one of these, that will constantly reapply. And we're using this as a spammable on the front, and this as an ability on the back. We have 100% uptime on our Major Ward and Major Resolve. There's our Major Ward and Major Resolve. We got the back bar, reapplied. 100% uptime on a resistance buff without needing to slot one. Very handy. This increases your max health by 3% for each shadow ability slotted. Lucky for us, we have 1 on the front and 1 on the back, so we keep the health bonus on both bars. Increases duration of your shadow abilities by 2 seconds. Now that does apply to the debuffs and stuff that these apply, and also the actual duration of the skill itself. So this bonus here with our resistance debuff is considered, and also our actual duration of our pet. So you do want to get those passives. This is of course important. After you drink a potion, any potion you like, you gain 20 ultimate. That is broken as hell in the consideration of how cheap this ultimate is. 70 ultimate. That's crazy. More than 20%, more than 25% actually, for this ability just for taking a potion. Take your potions. Increases your magicka by 8% for siphoning abilities slotted. We do not have any slotted. However, if you choose to use Legion Strikes, you will benefit from that amount. This increases your healing done by 3% for each siphon ability slotted. Again, we don't have any. If you're using Legion Strikes, that's fine. If you're not, you don't need it. So dump these 2. And casting a siphon ability generates 2 ultimate, and this can happen once every 4 seconds. We were benefiting from that. We no longer are, unless you're using this. But before we go any further, if you choose to use Legion Strikes instead of using this pet, you will lose a lot of damage. You will lose the debuff, and you won't get your return from this. So bear that in mind. The choice is yours, depends on what you're comfortable with, but this has been set up this way for a reason. Now, we are of course using dual wield on the front bar, so you want these passives. This will increase the damage of dual wield abilities by 20% against enemies under 25% health. So your light attacks, your heavy attacks, and your rend and slashes will contribute to this. This increases the weapon damage of your offhand. Offhand is less weapon damage than your main, so this helps. Reduces the stamina cost of dual wield abilities by 15%, so rend and slashes is cheaper. This will give you a 15% damage bonus when attacking stunned, immobilized, disorient, or silenced enemies. So rend and slashes, light attacks, and heavy attacks will benefit again. And of course, we are using 1 sword and 1 axe. We're not using any daggers, because if we're lucky, we don't need that extra crit. So we'll take the 3% damage increase from the sword, and we'll take the extra bleed from the axe. We're in the bow skill line now. We do need these. This will give you a damage bonus of up to 12% against enemies at longer range. So while you're on the run up to a fight, whether you're in or out of rotations or mechanics, and you've got to either come in and get in position, or you've got to go out because you've got to stand out of stupid. If you are ranged regardless, you will get a damage bonus to your bow abilities. So that's very helpful. Increases your weapon crit rating while on the back bar. Our crit bonus applies on the front bar. If you're already familiar with what this is using, you probably know what I'm talking about. But this will give us a bonus while on the back. Reduces the stamina cost of bow abilities by 15%. Very nice. Hawkeye is incredibly important. And why is this so easy to fire for us if we're practiced as a Nightblade? Our relentless focus requires light attacks. Our Reeve requires light attacks. And this passive requires light attacks, and so does one of our sets. If you can't keep up these light attacks, you need more practice. Now, this, for giving us one light attack, will give us a 5% bonus to all of our bow abilities. Another light attack will give us another 5%, and so on and so forth. We're not going to get the maximum potential out of this because we're not a bow build, but occasionally we will get between 3 and 4 stacks of this, and then we can swap to the front bar while they're still running. We still get the bonus, and then eventually it will run out. Make sure you do light attack. It will help your entire rotation and boost your bow at the same time. Don't fail those lights. Make sure they're very clear. Try not to go too fast, because if you go too fast, there's a global cooldown and they won't fire at all. So pace it and practice. This, of course, gives us a speed bonus if we dodge roll. So we're faster for 4 seconds. Don't dodge roll too quickly, one after the other. Because if you dodge roll once, you've got a cooldown before you can dodge roll again. Can you dodge roll again? Yes. But it has a negative effect. While that effect is still running, the purple one's at the bottom there, the dodge roll one, your next dodge roll and one after and after and after will get more and more and more and more expensive. So be very, very careful. There is kind of a penalty for dodge rolling too quickly. Now, we are using one piece of light, so you will need these first 3 passives. This will reduce the effectiveness of snares and reduce the cost of sprinting. This will increase our mag recovery and reduction to cost, which is very helpful. And this will increase your spell resistance. Medium, we need all of them because we are using 5 medium. This will increase your crit rating for every piece worn. This will increase your stam recovery and reduce the cost of stam abilities. This is for sneaking, so it's up to you whether you get it or not. This increases your weapon damage by 15%, and this will increase your movement speed while sprinting and reduce the cost of dodge roll. Heavy, of course, we do need just these 3 as well. Increases your physical and spell resistance by 362 for each piece worn. This will increase your health recovery, which isn't that important because we're a stage 4 vampire anyway. But we do restore 108 magic and stamina when you take damage once every 4 seconds for the 1 piece worn. This stacking alongside Reeve is actually really helpful. And this increases your health by 2% for each piece worn, and we do have 1. We are a vampire, of course. We want this one for the recovery for magic and stamina. And we want this one for the undeaf passive, because if you do take damage while under 50%, you will be hit less and less and less the lower your health is. This is really, really helpful. I use stage 4 vampire in all content, but you can go lower if you prefer. But if you do go below 3, stage 3, you won't get this passive. So be very, very careful. You must get this one. This is really, really strong. Most people, if they go to 50% health and then they get hit by something quite hard, will die. For us, up to 33% reduction. Crazy. Fighters Guild, you will need these passives. In fact, you'll need this one as well. We are using Barb Trap, and occasionally you may want to use Flawless Stormbreaker, depending on whether it's an AoE situation or not. If you do, Intimidating Presence will reduce the cost of this. But Dawnbreaker and Ring of Preservation are going to benefit us a little bit more, because we have Slayer, which increases your weapon damage by 3% for each Fighters Guild ability slotted. On the front bar, we have 2 bonuses, so it's a 6% bonus to weapon damage on the front. On the back bar, remember we have Ring of Preservation, or Circle of Protection. It protects the group, it gives them recovery, gives them a heal, and it gives us a 3% weapon bonus. Very helpful. When you kill an undead Daedra or werewolf, you will gain 9 ultimate for each one killed, if you kill them. So this is very important. And this is also what I was saying earlier, if you use Dawnbreaker in an area of effect situation. If they are undead Daedra or werewolf, of course you want to take advantage of this ability as much as possible, but if you do use a Dawnbreaker, you're going to get ultimate back so quickly you can borderline spam it in some situations. So this is a really helpful passive. And of course, if you do use Dawnbreaker or your Beast Trap, which you will be using anyway, your damage output is increased by 20% against undead Daedra or werewolf targets. Undaunted, of course, is incredibly important. You will need this. If you are presented with a synergy, take it. It will give you resources back for this passive. 4% across the board. It will keep your sustain up, it will keep you alive, it will help you to no end. And if you take a synergy regardless, every single one in the game will either give you a damage shield, damage output, a protection buff, a heal, or something to that effect. There are so many synergies in the game, they are all beneficial. Take every single one you can get. Also, this gives you a 2% bonus for every type of armor worn. We're wearing 3 different types of armor. 1 light piece, 1 heavy piece, 5 medium pieces. So we've got a 6% bonus to all 3 resources. Magic, health, and stamina is up. We are, of course, an orc. If you pick any other race, that's entirely up to you. The damage output will be slightly different, but you can use anything you want. In fact, if you use a wood elf, which we used to use, you've basically got infinite sustain, because the stamina recovery is so high, it's ridiculous. But we're an orc for a reason. 2k max stamina, 1k max health, and you heal off of your weapon abilities once every 4 seconds, and yes, it can crit. So your volley, your poison injection, your rend and slashes, your light attack, or your heavy attack, any of those can heal you, and they will, even at range, as long as it's running. And we have an increased weapon damage bonus, and we have a reduction to sprint cost and movement speed increase as well. So we have flat weapon damage, we heal from our damage, we've got higher health, we've got high stamina. It's very, very nice indeed. We're wicked quick and hit really, really hard. But again, if you wanted to use another race, that's entirely up to you. Medicinal use, of course, is the most important passive in the game, in my opinion, because it keeps you in the fight. Your resources are up, your buffs are up, all that good stuff. We are using weapon pot potions. Now, they last 47.6 seconds with this passive instead of 36. The cooldown is 45, so we have 100% uptime on those potions. I've seen some people fail really badly with really expensive pots, and they're trying to keep them for so long that they basically only use them when their stam is low. That's the incorrect usage. Use them all the time. Keep them up 100% of the time. You'll always have those bonuses. Now, we're going to go into the gear. There are options, of course. If you are using the original setup, you should be just fine, especially if you don't have any trial gear, but we will explain that as we go. Now, the first set is very easy to acquire because it's crafted. This is mechanical acuity, and we're using a sword on purpose alongside of an axe. Most people like to use a dagger on the front bar. We don't technically need it. The axe will give us a bleed, the sword will give us a 3% damage output overall. How does that apply to us since we don't have any crit chance because of our missing dagger? Well, the bonuses here are weapon damage and spell damage, max stamina and max magic, so we've got balanced stats. And when you deal direct damage, you have a 15% chance to gain a buff for 5 seconds, making you crit 100% of the time. And it has an 18-second cooldown, so 5 seconds up, 13 seconds down. The reason it's on our front bar, so weapons and jewelry, or weapon and body pieces, is up to you, is because we only want this to fire on our front bar because that's where our main spammables are. And because it's a 100% crit chance, what use is a dagger? None. So all you have to do is do direct damage. So light attacks, surprise attacks, killer's blade, the initial hit of rend and slashes, and you glow blue and have a 100% crit. Now, obviously it doesn't affect your procs, but it does affect all of your skills and poisons. It's very, very strong indeed. So that is why we're using the sword. More flat damage with guaranteed crit. Now, this has an element of luck, obviously, because it's a chance-based, but if you're in a good run, you're getting the procs on your side, this can fire sometimes every single time you want it to on the front bar. Normally every second rotation. But if you're too slow, it could fire at the end of the rotation, or if you're unlucky, and then you'll have it just on your back bar instead, which again is not the end of the world because all the crits you're firing are going to guarantee hit with a critical hit. Known honed on the sword to increase the weapon damage, and sharpened on the axe. Now, the jewelry is actually 1 bloodthirsty and 2 infused. I did try this with multiple different setups. 3 bloodthirsty was very nice for execute, but the passive overall fight was just down by so much it wasn't worth it. And when it came to the execute itself, although the damage output per skill was higher, the actual overall output was less. So 1 bloodthirsty and keep your flat damage up here. Now, the other set, of course, is the Master's Bow. You can get this from Vet Dragonstar Arena. There is a guide in the description on how to get that done, so get yourself in there, take some friends, and hopefully you can get it. Failing that, if you don't have this, you can, of course, use the Maelstrom Bow if you do still have it, or if you have access to it, or you can use an Agility Bow for the time being. This is a very simple weapon. It must be infused, and it must have a weapon and spell damage enchant on the back to keep your weapon damage up. But if you're struggling with sustain and you're not too good with heavies, you can change it to a stam return glyph if you prefer. Just bear in mind your damage output will go down. Now, how does this work? Poison injection on the target. That's it. If that is on the target, that will receive damage equivalent of 301 weapon damage extra from you. It doesn't show in your stats, it affects the target. And every target that has poison injection on is affected by that bonus. Every target that doesn't have it doesn't get affected. So if you hit him with a poison injection and there's 2 targets either side, they are not getting boosted. Only this one is. So bear that in mind. It's very, very strong indeed, but you have to apply that skill. Don't let it run out. Now, Krug is the monster set we're using. It has a penetration bonus, and then when you deal damage, it puts 2 flailing arms above your head and does damage over time for 1.2 seconds and actually fires every 0.4 seconds. So it's a very fast, close range damage over time, and it has a 3-second cooldown. So it's only down for 1.8 seconds after its final hit. It's very, very fast-paced indeed. You'll see it. Hands will come out of his back. You've seen it already a couple times. As long as you've got everything running, there you go. Now that'll keep going. 2, 1, go again. The more attacks you've got running, the faster that will fire. So keep your rotation up. It's very, very nice indeed. Not just for the penetration bonus, so we can alter our champion points for more flat, but because the damage over time in frontal AoE is actually really, really good. Now, we are, of course, using Reliquin. This is very important for the setup based on the fact that light attacks are utilized a lot from us. We get bonuses across the board for our light attacks with our Relentless Focus, with our Return, for our resources, all that good stuff. You've got to keep them up. But you don't need Perfected. If you just run normal trials and you never try to do Vet hard mode or anything like that, you can get the normal version and you'll just lose 1k stamina. That's the only difference in the set. So barely anything at all. This has 2 crit bonuses, minus Slayer, of course, to increase your damage output by 5%, and your light attacks put winds on the target. Every 1 second that you do another light attack or heavy attack, you'll add another wind up to a stack of 20. As long as your light attacks don't fall off for longer than 5 seconds, this will stay with you all the time. If it does fall off, all of your damage stacks, and it's a lot, are gone. And you have to reapply them. So not only did you fail with your Spectral Bow, not only did you fail with your resources, not only did you fail with your Hawkeye passive, but you also failed with your damage output of this. So if you can't keep these up, 1, you need to practice because you're using a Nightblade anyway. 2, use something else. If you miss a light attack every so often, it's not the end of the world. But if you keep missing it with this set, you're going to lose so much damage, it's not even worth you putting it on. So either practice it or take it off and use something else. Now, if you are using something else, you can, of course, use a Zerblight from Lair of Masterlock. This is a very, very nice set. For every damage over time tick that you do, up to 20 stacks will then explode. And this can land on multiple targets, and in an AoE stack, this is absolute filth. It will do very nice damage, and versus Reliquin, it wasn't that far off. It was only about a 5k drop. Also, you can use Alkosh or Briarheart or even Hunden's Rage if you're just starting out. There are many, many choices in the game that you can utilize instead of Reliquin if you're not very experienced with this set or if you don't have it. So, yes, there is a trial set on the setup, but you don't have to use it. I would recommend the Zerblight, by the way, overall, because it's disgusting. There's a video on my channel called 1 million DPS, and I demonstrate it in Area of Effect. It's really crazy. So, we'll go over the traits again. Nirnhoned and Sharpened on the front. Infused on the back. Poisons, by the way, are double poisons for 2 dots, which is really, really nice. We need Divines on everything. 1 light shoulder, 1 heavy helmet, or reverse order, doesn't matter. And 1 bloodthirsty and 2 infused on the jewelry. Now, we are going to go into the champion points, then I'm going to explain the rotation. 72 into Ironclad to reduce the amount of direct damage you take. 64 and 64 in Hardy and Elemental Defender to reduce the amount of damage we take from everything else. Regardless of whether it's direct damage or not, you still get a mitigation bonus for the type of damage it is, so they do stack up. And the same goes for this as well. Thick Skin will give us a 19% reduction to damage over time. Unchained, of course, is a very handy passive. If you get stunned and you have to break free, which you will do, your next stamina ability is 80% cheaper. That's when you want to chuck down a Circle of Protection. 19 points into Quick Recovery to increase our healing received by 5%. That's all of our healing received, by the way, not just our own heals, but other people that heal us as well. And of course, you've got the Field Physician passive open for 10 points in this tree. When you resurrect someone, you will take 15% less damage while doing so. Chuck down a Circle of Protection inside the area where you're standing and res them from there. Don't just res them blank. You want to make sure you got some heals while you're doing so. 44 points into Warlord to reduce the cost of break free. 75 into Tenacity to increase the amount of stamina you return from your heavy attacks. 75 into Mooncalf to increase our stamina recovery by 14%. Remember, it's quite high anyway. 72 into tumbling to reduce the cost of dodge roll. We will need to do that quite a lot, get the cost down. And we've got 4 points left, so we'll get a 1% block cost reduction here. The 0.97 doesn't actually do anything, but we've got 4 extra points in here, so we've got the 75 points in the tree for the treasure hunter passive. If you have this and you loot chests, you have higher quality gear. Nothing in here. 66 in Master at Arms to increase the amount of damage we do direct damage. 9 points in here, of course, to increase our light attack and heavy attack damage. And, of course, we've got the Butcher passive, so our Execute, our lights do more damage, and so do our heavies. Very important indeed. 51 points in Thermaturge to increase the damage over time we do. 61 into Precise Strikes to give us as much crit damage as we can possibly get versus the rest of our setup. 49 into Might, increasing our physical, poison, disease damage, which is all we're doing. And 34 into Piercing. I would normally go a lot higher than this. I'd normally go to 61, but we are using a sharpened weapon, and we do have a penetration bonus on our monster set. So this is why we can reduce this by quite a significant amount and take advantage of as many points in here as possible with the Execute passive as well. Now, rotation. This is going to be very simple, but you must keep up your light attacks. So, make sure you got a beast trap down when you get into the fight and start on your back bar. You start with volley, light attack, poison injection, light attack, pet, light attack, soul trap, swap bars. That is important. So we'll just demonstrate that quickly. Volley, light, poison, light, pet, light, soul trap, swap bars. Front bar, we would by now have our spectral bow ready. So we're just going to get that ready so we can demonstrate it. What you need to do: light attack, spectral bow, light surprise, light surprise, light surprise, light rend and slashes, light attack, delay, spectral bow, light attack, beast trap, swap. The reason you delay it is because your light attack is going to turn that into a spectral bow. It's your 5th light attack, guaranteed. But there's a slight delay as to when it does pop up. So if you notice here, we'll do... that's up to 2, that's up to 3, that's up to 4. Our next one, there's a slight delay when it changes. If you do it too quickly, you'll actually just reapply the ability itself, which isn't the end of the world, because we do need to do that occasionally. But if you just light attack, wait a split second, then fire it, you'll get the bow guaranteed. So to recap on the front bar, we'll just reset it as though its original state. Light spectral bow, light surprise attack, light surprise attack, light surprise attack, light rend and slashes, light delay, bow, light beast trap, swap. Now, if your relentless focus is about to run out, after you've done your second spectral bow, just before you swap bars, just before you press the beast trap, do light relentless once. So sometimes, let's reset the bow, you will have to do this. Light bow, light surprise 3 times, 2, 3, light rendon, light delay, bow, light relentless, light beast trap, swap. Every 30 seconds you'll need to do that way. Every other rotation, keep it simple. Now, when you're on your back bar and your ultimate is ready, if I apply this and I try to swap bars, I can't, because it's got a 0.4 second delay on it. So what we do is we volley, light, poison, light, pet, light, ultimate, light, trap, swap. The reason we do that is because the ultimate is going to keep us locked on this bar, but we can still do our light attacks and skills. So you activate it, light, trap, swap. It fills the gap, and you have less downtime on your ultimate bonus to the 20% increase to extra damage. Now, just bear in mind, of course, if you do run low on sustain, you can heavy attack. So instead of doing 3 surprise attacks with 3 light attacks, just do 1 surprise attack with a light and 1 surprise attack with a heavy, because the heavy will stack up 2 bonuses. Also, if you're feeling that you're too low on your resources, just do 2 heavy attacks and 2 surprise attacks and forget the rest. You'll still need to do rend and slashes, you'll still need to do the beast trap and all the rest of it, but you won't need to spam all these different amounts of surprises. Literally just heavy surprise, you will go slightly over on your ticks, but it will keep your sustain up and the damage output will be not far off. Now, when it comes to execute, all you need to do is make sure that your relentless focus is running, obviously, and instead of running surprise attacks and rend and slashes and all that good stuff, just stab 5 times, beast trap, swap, keep up your back bar dots and your ultimate, of course, and your pet if you need to, and then front bar, 5 stabs again. You do not use your bow, because if you don't use it, you can actually keep up your rotation much cleaner. You've got much more time to do some stabs, which are going to be much, much stronger execute. And, of course, you keep up that 10% mitigation bonus for having those 5 ticks. Even if Relentless Focus runs out, as you can see here, for being in combat, we still keep the stacks, it stays with us. 10% mitigation bonus at execute. Absolutely brilliant. So, now I'm going to demonstrate this on the dummy. This is very simple in application, but you will need practice to make sure you time those light attacks perfectly. Other rotations, you have to constantly swap this, swap that, hit this, hit that, just to keep an eye on a million buffs at once. It's not necessary. This is a static rotation. You can keep it up 100% of the time. The dummy rotation is going to be demonstrated as if we have high stam sustain. So, if you've been watching my channel recently, you've seen a build called the Hisskeeper. That's actually a healer. That is using the Master's Staff on the front bar. And if required, sometimes you can obviously spam that a little bit. You can sustain so easy with one of those in the room. So we're demonstrating as though we've got one of those in the room, maybe a Dwemer Spider or whatever, and we're using flat food. And that is the demonstration I'm now going to show you. So, here we go. So hopefully that helped, hopefully that wasn't too boring, hopefully now have a better understanding of how to approach this particular build. It is a difficult class to master, but if you can get your light attacks timed right, your skills will all fire correctly, and of course that will help you with other rotations as well, because generally light attacks need to be between skills to defeat the global cooldown and add more damage. This is a very good class to practice that with, because it's so important that you keep them up. So, first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support, and if you are not subscribing, please do hit that button. It is free. Also, if you would like to support outside the channel, there are some links in the description for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com, where all the written guides are. There's dungeon guides, trial guides, and arena guides as well, plus an add-on for PC for those mechanics videos if you have access to that. And of course, I do live stream every single night on Twitch from 10 PM UK time onwards, unless I say otherwise on Twitter. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching. Enjoy the build, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.